be live on the internet. So welcome everyone. If you do not want to be visible on the internet, we are live streaming. Just keep your camera off and you won't show up. Welcome everybody. Welcome. I'm gonna get out of the way as best I can here. Welcome. I need to pull up your nice your biographical information for a proper introduction, Casey.
Yeah, hopefully just an introduction, not my full biographical data would be good.
Sure, that's a good point. A very good point. Alrighty, we're gonna wait one more minute, friends, and then get started.
We're watching the video.
Yeah. Alrighty. Well, it is 12:01, so let's get started. I appreciate everyone hanging in there. Welcome to everyone else who's joining us. Please keep yourself muted. Just as a note, if you do not want to be on, this is being live streamed as well. So welcome to anyone watching on Facebook. I appreciate it. I'm Pastor Dustin here from Messiah Lutheran Church. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And we're going to get started. Let's get started. So, friends, you heard I preached a little bit about the story of Moldova, Casey, in my sermon today. So for those who are here in person at Messiah Lutheran Church, I talked a little bit about how the crop walk we're doing here and in Rotterdam, along with Schenectady Community Ministries. Crop walks happen throughout the country and throughout the world, and everywhere. 75% of the funds raised goes to an organization called Church World Service, which is the organization Casey works for in Moldova. And then 25% of funds raised go towards local hunger ministries, in our case, Schenectady Community Ministries and the Rotterdam Community Center. But I thought it'd be, it's sometimes harder to connect to sort of like the global side of how we work, and support people. And so that's why I'm so thankful that my friend Casey is joining us. Casey O'Neill, her is a protection program manager supporting Church World Services humanitarian response in Moldova. In this role, she assists local partners in developing and implementing direct services and programs for Ukrainian families while ensuring those services are accessible, safe, and free from the risk of violence. Casey proudly served as a Peace Corps volunteer in the Republic of Moldova from 2017 to 2019. And without further ado, here's Casey. Yay!
Yay! Hi, everybody. So thanks so much, Dustin, for that marvelous introduction. I very much appreciate it. I'm really glad to be here with you all, especially ahead of your upcoming crop walk in May. I appreciate you, Dustin, for reaching out. You always have the best ideas. And of course, really thankful for the congregations who are coordinating this crop walk, as well as all of you for deciding to join, whether in person or virtually. I'm going to share my screen in just a moment, so you'll have a visual to kind of help along with this chat. But just as Pastor Dustin had said, to be more formal, of course. Today, you're going to hear more about what CWS is doing to support Ukrainian refugees on the ground in Moldova, and how participating in the crop walk there in Schenectady County is going to help make that and other necessary and very incredible humanitarian work possible. So I'm also going to share a bit about Moldova, though I definitely appreciate that some of the conversation for today's service was already focused on the situation in Moldova. Share a little bit more about what CWS is doing in Moldova, the types of services that we're providing, and how we've been able to make that happen. And of course, I will leave any kind of time open for questions during the chat or after, whatever tickles your fancy. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so most of you are probably more or less familiar with Moldova now, especially that Moldova, for better or for worse, has made it onto the map for everyone. But as a little bit of a background, Moldova is a post-Soviet country. It's landlocked between Romania and Ukraine, and it has a population that speaks both Russian and Romanian. It's also about the size of Maryland, for comparison, but with a population that's about half the size of Maryland. And yet, despite that, relative to its population size, Moldova has welcomed the highest number of Ukrainian refugees compared to other Ukrainian neighbors, other neighboring countries, and also with much less resources, as it's not a member of the European Union. So it's likely that you have heard in the news about Moldova dealing with an energy crisis, warding off cyber attacks, trying to mitigate any kind of coups or protests that are taking place, and also knowing that it is a country that for a long time has struggled with unemployment, with poverty, with corruption, with other issues. But as Moldovans like to say, and I do too, it is a small country. It has many of those issues that it's battling and fighting against, but it's a country with people with a big heart. And that's very evident by the number of people that have been welcomed into Moldova. So since February of last year, Moldova has welcomed about 770,000 Ukrainian refugees. Some of those refugees have gone on to other countries, they've returned to Ukraine, or they've decided to stay in Moldova for the time being, making use and depending on the services and the resources that we have been providing to them at CWS and with our partners. So I drew up this map as a helpful visual for everybody to know where CWS is in Moldova. This is a map of Moldova. We can imagine that on everybody's right-hand side is Ukraine, and on everybody's left-hand side is going to be Romania. Small little country, and the different areas that have names of the cities or names of the rayons or county districts are where we typically have partners. The lighter colors are indicative of where we have, our partners working. And I'm going to go a little bit further into detail about all the different types of services and resources that we've been providing. But as of right now, we have 9 implementing partners. It's pretty incredible because there's really only 3 of us full-time working in Moldova, kind of all the time around the clock to make sure that we're able to maximize impact and help as many folks as we possibly can. So in Moldova, CWS does a number of different things, a lot of different types of support to Ukrainian refugees. It's basic needs, it's medical assistance, psychosocial assistance, psychological assistance, support with livelihoods and vocations, which is job trainings, legal assistance. And we also have programs and partners focused on advocating and improving access for Roma Ukrainian refugees. Roma refugees who have been historically discriminated against and marginalized, and so who need additional support in being able to access services that other Ukrainian refugees have been accessing. What's really unique about Moldova is that because there is such a large portion of the population that is also experiencing vulnerability, we try to make it so that our assistance and our support is also open to vulnerable Moldovans. I'll talk about that a little bit as well. And then, of course, we also have a sustainable energy aspect. So a little bit dizzying, but there's a lot of different things that we do to try to make it so that we can provide as comprehensive and holistic support as possible. So first things first, and especially where the crop walk kind of comes into play, provision of basic needs or immediate needs. So this is including food, it's hygiene and dignity packets. So that's toothbrushes and shampoos. It's household items that include dish soap and sponges, laundry detergent. It's also winter items, especially during the November, December, January, February months. That's clothing, so thicker clothing, coats, bedding, things that are going to make it easier for people to stay warm through the winter, especially those who are struggling with heightened energy prices. And a lot of these basic needs are provided both in person, where people can come to our distribution centers. We have about 2 distributions up in Belts. If you think about the map that was at the beginning, it's a city that's all the way in the northern part of the country. We also have another partner in Chisinau, which is the capital, who's helping to distribute different types of food and non-food items. We also have up in Belts, based in Belts, our distribution center that also provides deliveries to folks in the northern region. So that was a lighter part of the map that kind of showed the influence where people may not be coming in person, but they have the possibility to receive services. There's also livelihoods and vocational support. What's really interesting about this is that it creates an opportunity for people, for Ukrainian refugees in particular, to be able to socially integrate into Moldovan society by being able to take Romanian language courses. Of course, Ukrainian refugees are either speaking Ukrainian, they're speaking Russian, they do not know Romanian, and they need to know Romanian in order to be able to get a job and to stay in Moldova. So we provide Romanian language courses that allow them to get a handle on those language skills, scholarships for vocational services. And as of right now, those services are learning how to become a tailor or a seamstress, a nail technician, a cosmetologist, hairdresser. The beauty industry in Moldova is very big and popular. And so a lot of those vocational opportunities lie within that domain of work. And we also include a childcare center, which allows for guardians who are partaking in any of the vocational courses to be able to leave their child at the childcare center so that they're able to take those classes without having to worry about childcare, or if they have any kind of chores that they need to do. So it's just another piece of support that makes it as easy as possible for different Ukrainian refugees to be able to have success in these different types of opportunities. Kind of grouped all together: psychological, psychosocial, legal, and medical support. A lot of different things that are offered under this umbrella. We have different partners who are providing one-on-one therapy. They are trained psychologists, trained social assistants. They're also leading group therapy as a way to help folks become a little bit more easily acclimated to the idea of getting psychological support. In terms of psychosocial support, which is really a way to allow people to integrate, develop social skills, really foster a network and a sense of community. There are options to do masterclasses. So masterclasses have been things like learning how to make wreaths or other kinds of Moldovan food items and Moldovan recipes, handcrafts, again, as a way to kind of bring people together and use art and social time as a way for healing. We also have an online educational center that we've been supporting, where Ukrainian children are able to go to this center and be able to keep pace with the Ukrainian classes. There have been some struggles and difficulties with Ukrainian children going into the Moldovan school system, language being one of the biggest pieces of that. And so this allows a safe and comfortable and fun place for Ukrainian children to go so that they can continue with their education. There's also youth recreational activities. In the center photo, this was a youth quest that was put on by our partners, Friends of Moldova in Zdrowy Gorod, again, up in Belts, that had a couple hundred Moldovan and Ukrainian youth coming together to learn about Belts and get more familiar with the city there. There's also been sessions for guardians. We have a new partnership with an organization called the Diamond Center, also in the northern part of Moldova, that not only creates a safe after-school program for both Moldovan and Ukrainian youth, but also invites every other week mothers or guardians of Ukrainian children to kind of come together to socialize, to find support and peers. There's also legal consultations, which is ever so important, especially as Moldovans and Ukrainians rather are trying to gain temporary protection so that they can stay long-term in Moldova, so that they can navigate any kind of services without running up against issues with documents. Medical consultations with specialists. We have quite a few different doctors, medical assistants, who are able to see Ukrainian refugees in a shorter amount of time, be able to prescribe any kind of medications that are needed. And then again, these services are also provided both in person, where individuals can go to those centers if they have access to them, if they're living in those cities where they're located. And we also have a mobile service, so a vehicle that goes in different parts of northern Moldova to provide any kind of medical and psychological assistance that's needed. When it comes to talking about increasing advocacy and access for Roma refugees, Many of the services that are provided are similar, if not the same, than all of the ones that were previously stated. But a big part of it is mapping. Roma refugees, as I've said before, have Roma in general, both in Moldova, in Ukraine, and other parts of Europe, have been historically discriminated against and marginalized. Unfortunately, coming into Moldova, Ukrainian Roma refugees have experienced segregation. They've experienced refugee accommodation centers or accommodations in general that have worse conditions, have experienced worse treatment. And so 2 of our partnerships are with Roma-led organizations that have engaged in mapping, so learning where people are living, learning what their needs are, and being able to mediate between them and service providers to ensure that those Roma refugees are able to access all the services that they need, and according to all the humanitarian standards. So this has included information, includes advocacy, includes referrals to service providers, as well as basic needs, foods, household items, appliances, legal, medicine, and medical support. Something that seems like maybe it wouldn't be quite related, but is ever so important is sustainable energy. So far, we've had two partners or 2 community centers in a sense where we have installed solar panels. This comes into play for 2 reasons. One, the community centers that have received solar panels have become refugee accommodation centers. So in one example, it was a youth summer camp in the northern part of Moldova. In the second example, it is a senior center. But at the onset of the crisis, they opened up their doors and created living spaces for Ukrainian refugees to stay. So with taking on additional people to stay, especially during the winter months, that increases any kind of energy costs. As we probably all know, gas is very expensive. It's even more expensive in Moldova for people who have to take care of additional folks on their premises. And so adding these solar panels makes it or helps to kind of mitigate those costs or increases in costs. And it's also a way that we can support the Moldovan host communities for the longer term. Solar panels are something that's going to hopefully last long beyond this crisis and this conflict. And it's something that can be used by these community centers and by these communities for, 30 years and beyond. So there's quite a variety of different services that we provide, and I know I've likely gone through them quickly. I've been told I speak fast, so luckily there are going to be time for questions after or any kind of comments that you have. But what really makes this possible? We have a couple different people, a couple different groups that really come into play for making these services in person on the ground possible. Of course, we have our team and our partners pictured in the middle. Our folks from our team, from our implementing partners, those local organizations that we work with to provide those direct services and support to refugees. I always like to say this is a nice picture because my sister had sent chocolate chip cookies to me and I shared them with my partners, and for many of them, this was their first time having a chocolate chip cookie. So as you can see, they are very excited and very happy. Again, food brings people together. We also, of course, get support from larger congregations, larger faith-based organizations like UMCOR. And then, of course, we also get support from local congregations and individuals such as yourselves who are really taking the time to engage in different activities and learning opportunities like this crop walk. Let me see. So I know that throughout this presentation, there's been quite a bit of focus in general on what's been going on in Moldova, the entire gamut of different types of services, and not always a clear link between all of these types of services and then a crop walk that is focusing on alleviating hunger and hunger awareness. But if anything, in being here, I can say for sure that it is not possible to be able to provide or even for someone to obtain all of these different types of services if their most immediate needs are not met. And if we think about Maslow's hierarchy, people can't think about medical, social, psychological, self-actualization, any of those kinds of opportunities and experiences if they don't have basic needs like food, hunger, taken care of. So with that said, this is why this crop walk is so important and what the relationship is. Oftentimes we've seen that people coming to our distribution centers or engaging with our partners are coming because those centers are providing food items. This doesn't only alleviate hunger, it doesn't only fill people's bellies, but it also alleviates stress within families. It reduces that worry about where somebody is going to get nutritional food for themselves or for their family, for their children. It frees up money so that they can use that money for other needs, whether it's household needs, whether it's paying for utilities, whether it's paying for rent. And it also allows people to engage with one another. A lot of our distribution centers, places that have provided any kind of food and non-food item assistance have become sources and hubs of information where people can go, they see each other regularly, they develop a sense of community, and through a sense of community, they develop safety, and they develop a sense of belonging. And so that's why, you know, acknowledging and addressing this core need, and even in something that seems so simple and so basic, is so important. And so I really want to extend my appreciation to you all for taking the time to engage with this kind of issue and to think about how this is impacting folks all over the world. We know that what we do impacts one another. What has happened, what is taking place in Ukraine through the Russian invasion of Ukraine has repercussions. It's sending ripples across the world. I know from having been in the United States that gas and food there is so expensive. Here in Moldova, it is so expensive. And so that's why it's all the more important to think about what it is that we can do to help one another to alleviate those kinds of stresses and strains. And so I really appreciate you considering and taking into account how what you do there in New York, in Schenectady County, is having implications and a positive impact 7,000 miles away here in Moldova. So with that said, thank you, or mulțumesc mult. I put my information up here. And then, of course, if you have more questions or if you want to look at more pretty pictures, I've also put up a QR code that you can scan, and I'm sure Pastor Dustin can share how to do that. To look at our report about the last year.
I was reading that report to prepare for today's sermon, so I'll certainly link directly to the report itself in the Facebook recording of this once this is over. People that are watching on Facebook now, it's not there yet. But Casey, I love what you said about how food brings people together and how that's sort of an entry point into everything else you're providing for the community there. And I think that's such a big part of what we're trying to do at our Rotterdam Community Center too, right? Food as the entry point to building community. So I guess my first question was, because I visited Lutheran World Federation run refugee camps in Syria, in Jordan for Syrians. And there a big piece of it was, you had to stay in the camp. So it sounds like most of the folks in Moldova are sort of somewhat more mainstreamed into society. Is that the case, or?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. There is definitely a difference between, staying in a refugee accommodation center versus maybe staying in private and families' homes, and whether or not that means that they're mainstreamed or integrated into society. But I definitely can say that the vast majority of Ukrainian refugees who have come into Moldova have been staying with host families or in private accommodations. So that actually can make things a little bit more difficult at times for integration if people are living in private accommodations. And so that's why having distribution centers that are providing food and social activities, psychosocial support can be so important to helping with that integration and social cohesion piece.
Amen. Gotcha. Yeah. I could ask 20 billion questions, but I know it's been a long church day and I bet other people have a couple. So, and folks, if you're joining online too, just, chime in. But what questions do y'all have for Casey or comments? Yeah. Yeah, you can talk about it.
Hi, Casey. name is Rebecca. I was wondering if you could mention the price gap between food that we distribute here in America versus the price that it would be in Moldova, and what's is it more of a culturally sensitive pantry, and how do you do that?
Did you hear that, Casey?
I heard bits and pieces of it. Would you be able to summarize or repeat it?
Yeah, so Rebecca was asking about what was the difference in the cost of food from here to Moldova, and also asking whether the food distribution centers in Moldova sort of have kind of culturally sensitive sort of, foods that people actually, eat in the culture.
Yeah, those are great questions. I can only think about my experience of going shopping here, and I would say that many of the ingredients and items available in stores are probably on par with American prices, or at least prices that I would find in the States. That's not entirely true, across the States. But for a person making an American salary, that can still hurt, that can still be expensive, but it's not going to hurt in the same way that it's going to hurt a Moldovan or a Ukrainian refugee who is already making far less than that. A vast majority of Moldovans are also below the poverty line here. And so it has huge implications for what they're able to afford. When it comes to, I really like your question about the cultural sensitivity piece. And I appreciate you bringing it up because it's something that I failed to bring up earlier. One of the beautiful things about having, food security as a piece of humanitarian assistance is an ability to bring, empowerment, dignity, respect into the process. And so for the different distribution centers that we worked with, like our largest one that is up again in Belts, they've selected items based off of feedback that they've received from Ukrainian refugees. It's also really important to note that for that particular distribution center, about 25 of the people who are working there are Ukrainian refugees. So they're very involved in that process of helping to select, of gaining feedback, of using that feedback to make adjustments and changes. And we've also had experiences in one of our refugee accommodation centers that we provided support to where parents who were staying there had said that, our children are not going to eat this. And so they were able, the staff there, to make adjustments based off of what was going to be better received. And in those distribution centers where people are not having meals themselves, but they're selecting items, they have the opportunity to go through and select the items that they want and leave the items that they don't want. And again, introducing that sense of choice makes it a different experience for them. So I hope I answered your question. It's a great question.
Yeah, thanks.
And very similar conversations that we have here, in Rotterdam, right? That was one thing to tease out a little bit more. So it was the story I shared in my sermon today was from that report, Casey, and it was the one story of a single mom who was running like sort of a teen support group who was a Ukrainian refugee herself. So a lot of the folks that are sort of employed in these centers, they are refugees themselves, it sounds like.
I can't speak for all of the different centers that are existing across Moldova, but when it comes to the ones that we're in partnership with, I can think of at least maybe 4 or 5 different partners out of our 9 who have employed Ukrainian refugees. And that's not even just in terms of food distribution. It can also be for psychological support, education support at one of the online education centers. For another, it was a person who had previously been a doctor in Ukraine. And so they were including that person and providing medical support at the refugee accommodation center. There's definitely an openness to making the most of people and the skills and abilities that they have, because they are, even though they're in this situation, they're still people with agency who have much to offer. And I think that a lot of our partners are trying to make the most of that and embrace that.
Amen. Awesome. Any other questions? My goodness. Yeah, one more. Yeah, go for one more.
When you spoke about personal hygiene, that does include women's feminine products, and that can be quite expensive as well. And then is there conversations about that in general, and also giving them resources for other places to have that, or young teens and within the programs that are there? either virtual or those facilities.
Okay, I think I got that question. I know that you asked about the availability of menstrual health items and whether or not people can access those kinds of, particular type of hygiene needs. Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Love that question because it's a protection question, and protection is what I do, among all the other things. So yes, the distribution center that I was talking about and that I've been referencing quite a lot, both of them provide menstrual health items. So that's panty liners, it's pads, it's those kinds of items. And we try to make sure that there isn't a limit on it so that it creates more opportunity for people to get those things without having to feel like they need to stock up, or they need to save, or they need to, avoid using it so that it lasts longer. We try to be very sensitive to those kind of things, because when people don't have access to that, it can put them in a situation of more vulnerability and risk. For other organizations, we have, I don't know if I'm going to answer the second part of your question the best because I kind of heard it, but I'm gonna go with it. When it comes to our partners, we try to create a space for them to give us feedback from month to month about what's working, what's not working. So as a concrete example, we have a Roma-led organization it's led by a Roma woman, and she's very attentive to the particular needs of women and children and families in that community. And so we're now working with her to create kind of additional financial support so that she can make sure that she has items on hand, especially for mothers and for babies. So that can be strollers, it's formula, it's diapers. That's also provided or offered at the other distribution center. It's women's undergarments. So we try to create an openness where people can make sure that they have access to those things. Does that answer your question?
Yes, because in New York, the Senate just passed a law for all shelters to give hygiene products for free, and that's a huge expense. And like you were saying, women will try to use those type of tampons or pads longer because it's so expensive, and they do put more health risks to their own bodies. And that has a domino effect of everything else. Yeah, so that's great. Thank you.
You're absolutely right. I'm excited to hear that. I didn't know that about New York, so that's exciting. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, I could ask 20 more questions, but I know y'all, it's been a long day at church. And so, yeah, unless there's any final questions. Well, I think, Casey, a massive thank you for, this was so interesting. And how do you know how much longer you're over there? Like, what's your deal at this point?
Oh, it's a great question for my manager, who's also on the call, but I won't call him out now.
Fair enough. All right. Well, definitely keep in touch, and certainly, we're thinking of you and all the important work you're doing over there. And thank you so much for taking time out of your early evening to join us half a world away. It's awesome.
Yeah. Thank you all so much, and best of luck with the crop walk. I'm looking forward to seeing the photos. So thank you for the opportunity.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Casey.
Thank you.
Bye, y'all.
Thank you. Have a good one. Bye.
So that's crazy.